Live from the Arcadian Court, it's Graham Kerr's Gathering Place. Now, the man who loves to cook for the people he loves. Here's Graham.
Isn't this amazing? Thank you so much. Thank you very much for being here. It's lovely to have you. Hey, that's great. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I am so thrilled that you're here today. Now, I know I say this time and time again, week after week, day after day, but this is very special for me. In the honors that I've had in my life, nothing has ever even approached the fact of being asked to be a visiting professor at the Culinary Institute of America. It's otherwise called the CIA, and they've got a Food and Beverage Institute there called the FBI, but I mean, aside from that, this is a wonderful spot. And I want to introduce you today and have you welcome my special guest here, because this is the most influential chef educator in the world today, in my judgment. This is Ferdinand Metz. He's president of the Culinary Institute of America. Please welcome Ferdinand. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to hear a lot more. I normally call him Mr. President. Can I call you Ferdinand today? Just for a little bit of time?
You always have.
Oh, well, all right, fine. Okay. I didn't realize that. I thought it was Sir Ferdinand. But anyway, so we're going to talk about that. Let me tell you something first about how I feel about people like Ferdinand, because he's a salmon. And I don't know whether you've ever heard this before, but it's called the stamp of the salmon. It's someone who swims upstream against all rationality in order to, well, spawn, I suppose, and then see a shoal of new salmon coming down stream and then out into the world and then turn around, and then they're bound to swim up the same stream again. There's a difference, however. There's the Atlantic salmon, which he is, which means that that Atlantic salmon can go upstream, spawn, and turn around and come downstream again and still go swimming. Whereas the Pacific salmon, and I live on the West Coast, it goes upstream in exactly the same way, spawns and dies. And my big thing in life is to find out how you keep on going up and downstream like you do. It's just amazing. Okay, so let's go and look at the Culinary Institute of America. We go, as you know, all over the world, 100 different cities. Let's go now to just shy of Poughkeepsie, upper New York State. If you've ever seen that, it's on the Hudson River. And this is where you will find the Culinary Institute of America. That's our journey today. This is Route 9. You go past the Vanderbilt estate and the Roosevelt estate, and eventually you come to the Culinary Institute of America estate. It used to be a Jesuit monastery and has been converted now in an absolutely stunning way. This is home to 22,000 students, I guess, in the overall at any one time. 10,000 chefs come from all over through the various, the two parts of the Culinary Institute of America every year. I picked up this book, which you'll see in a moment, in their library, and I also picked up this book, my very first cookbook that I ever wrote. And look at this. It was made to Danny Kaye. I wrote it to him and gave it to him, and it was part of Danny Kaye's collection, which was given to the CIA. Well, anyway, aside from those marvelous experiences, I sat down to have a look at the way that the core is taken out of that apple for a moment. I'll get back to that. This is Dan Kish. He's a chef instructor, and this is in the American Bounty restaurant, where all the chef pâtissier, or the pastry chefs, do their thing in full gaze of, it's like a huge bay window, and you see from the restaurant into the kitchen and see the operation going on at that time. I'll show you all the details about this. And this is being done, Dan explained to me, you know, this is how he used to do this as a young man. He grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania, and he just loved to cook. And the farm was a dairy farm, and as you can see by the butter that he was putting on, he was not shy of using butter. And we were talking as he was doing this about how we would take the basic classic method and then we would start making a difference to produce a crumble or a crisp of really elegant quality at the same time. So as I'm talking to you today, I was at that time filming this and loving the smells in that kitchen were just gorgeous. You know how comforting a good apple crisp can be. So look at this, by the way. It just saw the butter bubbling away on the side of the dish, and I just had to put my spoon in there to have a look. And the fragrance of the butter and the fragrance of those apples coming up. By the way, I have the finest china that I've ever found anywhere in the world. Just great. So I had a piece of it just to see what it was like. Let's tune in. So let's see how it is. Oh, look at that. That's good. That is very good. Thank you. Well done. Now, what you don't know is that immediately following that, I said, how on earth am I going to do anything with that? You see, but we worked on it. This you do a lot by taking the great classics and then moving on from there. First of all, I want to know, for you as a little salmon, right at the very beginning, it was in Munich, and how did you start in this business?
Well, I grew up in a family that owned a little hotel and restaurant and butcher shop, and on my 50th birthday, my parents said, we have a big surprise lined up for you, and I opened some of the presents, and one of which had a chef's uniform and a knife in there. And they said, great surprise, you start your apprenticeship tomorrow.
Without any further ado? I mean, just that was it?
That was career choice in those days.
In the old style?
Yeah.
And you've been there, and I know you were at the Pavilion in New York and at the Plaza, and wonderful places.
And I think that background allows you then to look beyond of what was done in those days.
Yeah.
In terms of the cuisine, to look beyond and say, well, there's more that we can do and more that we should do. And I think that's exactly what you are doing.
Okay. Well, now let me show you this book for first. You saw me get it out of the library. And by the way, the library is very helpful for all of what we've done within the United States, have helped point us out to what we're doing. This book here, can I say this to you? This is the Bible within the Culinary Institute of the healthier styles of cooking. It's brilliantly done and wonderful photographs. And you may say to yourself, but I don't run a restaurant. And of course you don't. But maybe you have a restaurant that you do like and that you would love to give a copy of this to the chef. Maybe you're at a club and you'd love the club to be able to have this. There's 1,000,001 reasons why, and I would be very happy to point you to those directions. Jim over there, he's lovely. He's just not practicing. He's actually quite good at this. But every time he does that, it means that there's a commercial break of some kind. Yeah. So I'll tell you what, I'll come back, cook that dish that I learned from Dad, and then we'll be back and you taste it and see what you think.
Super.
Okay, we'll be back in just a moment. Nothing very elegant. I wanted to be kind of muted and elegant today. This is Nicole Miller's first tie that she ever designed. There's only a few of them left in existence. You can tell it by the price of the fruit. It's 79 cents a pound for tomatoes. I mean, it's getting on a little bit now.
Well,
And I don't even want to address you. You have now sunk to the level of sartorial splendor.
yes, sir. It's not easy being green, you know.
It's not easy. You look part of the Green Party.
Well, I was going to say that it's a salute to our Greenpeace friends. And, and you are a lot like a green cook.
Oh, I am?
I think, yes, I
oh,
think you
well,
are.
thank you. Well, that doesn't mean immature. But,
not immature, but
fine.
very fine.
No, you might think this is marvelous repartee and it's all scripted. Of course it isn't, and you've realized that over the weeks. I understand. This is still continuing, and he's still looking for ties. And now we are merging. It is now becoming to the place when I look at them and I find him acceptable. And this is... It's just wonderful. Well done.
Wrong with that.
Well done. I just feel like I've done something. I feel like a salmon. At last, something's happened. Okay, let's have a look at this first of all. Then please, as we approach this whole business of food, wash up. You know, I've got wedding ring on here, which was put to me the other day. Well, we see you wash your hands, but and that's wonderful. But what about the rings you wear? I said, try getting it off. You know, life has wedded me to this ring. This is not coming off my hands. So there we are. Done. Now, apples, first of all. Oh, I've got to show you something which is really phenomenal. Have you seen one of these? It's not Halloween. This is amazing. This is a thing for keeping fruit. And I came across it the other day, and it is quite remarkable. You just pop the fruit into this little pocket here, and hang them up. And they don't, you know how, sorry, you know how fruit, don't you, how fruit lies alongside each other and you get fruit flies and everything else. We live on a boat and we hang about 5 of these up in the boat, and we've never lost a piece of fruit now since we've been doing it. It's really remarkable, really good, and tomatoes do well as well. Just look for it where your produce stand is, or demand it, or whatever you have to do. Okay, now let's look at this. Apples are not created equal. There are wonderful apples that we could use for this one. I thought instead of just using apples, I'd throw in a few pears. Love this, you know, that marvelous smoothness of pears. So a Bosc pear seems to go very well. That's a Bosc pear. I started to look to see what we had. This is a Spartan apple, which is reasonably good from this point of view. This one is called a Crispin. I think it might be some sort of a blend of the Cox's Orange Pippin, the old English apple here. This is a Macintosh, doesn't look much like a computer anymore. And this is, of course, the Granny Smith, that famous crisp green apple. It's always so useful. But it was this one that we thought might do. This is a Northern Spy. And we thought, how appropriate for the CIA up in northern New York State, you know, to be called a Northern Spy. So we couldn't resist using that. It actually happens to be very good. It's very hard to get on the West Coast. So on the West Coast, you might like to look for a John of Gold, perhaps. Now, peel it and just put it in here. There's one thing that I wanted to show you, as these have gone a little brown, as the air has touched the top of those. I've got lemon juice in the water here. You see, when lemon juice isn't there, how this browns quite markedly. This is oxidizing, and so an antioxidant is the lemon juice. So, you know, you take antioxidants, what's happening with an antioxidant is you are simply receiving free radicals into just breathing them in and going brown inside as well. And if you take if you take these marvelous antioxidants, they just come and zap those free radicals, and so that stops the browning process inside you, which is a very good idea. So that is just something that you might enjoy. Now, every time that I go to the CIA and I learn something. Every single time I walk through classes and learn it and learn it and learn it. In this case, what Dan was doing was he was simply taking the core out of the apple. This is a particularly large one. He had smaller ones there. With a melon baller. Is that the normal way you do it? You've always done that the whole of your life.
That's Dan's way.
Dan's way, okay. I looked at that, and I have seen, have you got one of those, apple cores that you drive in from the top? and then you can't get the thing out of the apple corner. And it always loses, it leaves pieces of stuff behind. This won't do it. That melon baller just digs it out like that. And I saw that, I thought, my goodness, of course. That's excellent. I think that's the thing. If you ever wanted to go to food school, what a wonderful thing to do, to be able to see people who've made their whole lives and become experts at doing things. And you just pick it up all the time. And you do it more in an institutional environment than I think you do on television. Television's a mix of so many different things. Here's 8 slices of the, and I want to have it that big. He'd cut his on a mandolin. If you don't know what I'm talking about, a mandolin is not a musical instrument. No, he didn't do that. It's a thing called a mandolin. It's a cutting device. So we'll put that on the top. I cut the pear already into 1/4 pieces. I wanted it nice and fat because I wanted it to soak up the juices. I wanted it to become sensual in this dish. I wanted it to pop and smooth and caress, in a marvelous way. I'm going to cut down a lot of things, but I don't want to cut down the fun and enjoyment of food. So, okay, there it is. Now, what do we do here? We've got this pan, and so I'm just going to strain these off just for a moment. Get that down in the pan. Since this is going to go brown anyway, it doesn't really matter if they're brown just a little. So there they go. Pears and the apples, nice amount. And here there's a 1/2 cup of golden raisins, just sprinkled into the top surface. And 1/8 of a teaspoonful of cloves. And in this case, I think ground cloves are probably better. The odd thing about that whole clove, in the old days, and you get one, and you're bound to get it in a cavity somewhere. This way, I think it's fine, especially if you can get it very fresh and keep them fresh and use it quickly. Don't leave it for 3 years, in just lying around in some sort of discreet place in your kitchen. Now, into this, this becomes different. This is a real difference. I want to put in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, carefully measured. This is a wine without alcohol, and that means that it was made with alcohol, and just as a proper wine, then the wine was submitted to, it's really a reverse osmosis process, and which takes out all the water and all the fine molecules of the alcohol as well. Then they replace the water back into it and send the alcohol down the road to Mr. Mondavi or whoever. And in this case, what I wanted to do was to have a substance that I could have. It's not grape juice. It has real character to it. And I want to put that in there and get that for the poaching of that fruit there. Now, just get a piece of waxed paper like so, and we'll toss that over the top. Just keep folding it as you go around. Just fold, fold, fold. And then try and imagine just how much you need to be able to get into the middle. So that would be about there. Just cut that off. And then you can just place that down over the top. And it's got to fit down on top of the apples there so that they can have a good opportunity to be able to poach. So you'd bring it to the boil and then let that settle. And this is what it looks like when they're done. It takes about 15 minutes of poaching. And with this, we'll just simply take these to this dish here. Now, look at that, please. Every one of those is now cooked, but look at what it looks like. It has become a sponge for the flavor that came from that dealcoholized wine. If it was an alcoholic wine, and please go ahead, just choose yourself. It would wind up the same way because the alcohol would now boil off during that period. So here we've got it. Now I'm deliberately sieving this out because of what I want to have happen. Can you imagine what that's like? It's really soaked it up. Beautiful flavor. And it's got that little bit of clove in it too. Now this, I've got that amount of juice in the bottom of the pan. I want to reduce that sort of gently and be able to come up with a way of being able to utilize that at the end. That's the second dish that I've got coming on there. So I'll tell you what, whilst that's reducing, I'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Okay, thank you. Now, everything about this sort of thing is always predicated upon the fact this is the classic, honor the classic, move into the future. If there are people in the restaurant business today who are saying, give me desserts which are less than or around about 200 calories, then we have to find a way to be able to do that with owing everything to what has gone in front of us, but then investing what we now know about food into that food, searching for something brilliant that can come through it and provide for the modern-day person at the same time as celebrating our past. So we look at this, for example, ingredients are everything. This is the old-fashioned oatmeal. That's the one, the old-fashioned one, the hard, solid flake. This one is the modern way of cooking oatmeal in 1 minute or less. It's the instant one. This goes to pap in this dish. It really doesn't work. So always select the very best ingredients you can. So go to the old-fashioned. So we've got here a half cup of old-fashioned oats. There is a cupful of brown sugar, soft brown sugar, which has got lots of character to it. We took here some of the graham cracker biscuits that you've got. We broke them up roughly in a bag and simply added those. Those are almost like grape nuts. They've got that crisp quality to them. We've got three tablespoons full of sliced almonds are thrown in there for a bit more character. And then here, 1 teaspoonful of cinnamon and a 1/4 teaspoonful of nutmeg thrown in to the top. And remember, you've got the cloves underneath and the cinnamon and nutmeg on the top, all of which are spicing and have this wonderful updraft when it hits you. Now, in addition, we have butter. And this is really a big surprise. And butter is a wonderful ingredient. And sometimes it simply cannot be avoided. Nowadays, we're finding out things that with some of these fats of hydrogenated fats are perhaps potentially more difficult for one than the saturated fat is. Not a lot of it, but, you know, in this particular case, it works well. There is nothing better in this whole wide world than hands, and thank goodness for these marvelous little gloves. Haven't they made a great deal of difference? You never had these back in Munich, did you?
No. No. We just started them in the state of New York about 3-4 years ago.
Only
It's mandatory now to use
Really?
them.
Mandatory?
For foods that no longer will be cooked.
Ha! Okay. Well, that's... And you get through an awful lot of these, don't you?
You should have got stuck in the company.
Really? So here it goes. There is the mix, which is done, and that is ready then to be able to simply place onto the top. It doesn't need to be extremely fatty for this reason. We simply take that mix, pour it out onto the top, and just shake it through so that it drops down. And then here's an interesting little thing that's been developed. This is one of these pump sprays that you can find nowadays. And this is a little canola oil, which is just seasoned, just spread out over the top, just a little bit, just a spritz of it. And then that goes into the oven. Goes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Takes about half an hour. And remember that, you know, the apples and everything are already cooked. Drops into the lower oven. You don't have those. You have to go in the same oven and come out again, which is wonderful. And the smell of this is just gorgeous. So we'll bring that out, let that just cool down so that we'll be able to eat it properly. And I've got over here in a pan a really interesting thing. These are little pears, and I've been cooking them down gently in their own juice. Now, this is a low sugar content juice, you know, when there's what they call a light syrup. And that's all I've done with them. But what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to sprinkle them over the top with some toasted walnuts and some crystallized ginger, all right? And I'm just going to leave those to just soak through in those pears there, in that pan. Ginger and walnuts and that juice underneath and the smoothness that you get from pears. Because I just want to try a new dish on you for the very first time tonight. Apart from all of this, something quite new. Okay, so we'll be back in just a couple of minutes and we can have a good chat then about what's going to happen in the restaurant business because of you guys and serving you in the future. So back in a second. Okay, great. Now, if you've been following us recently, you'll know that we've been hearing from scientist after scientist who sit in hallowed, you know, I mean, not hallowed necessarily, but ivy halls. And what they say is that the restaurants are, in effect, somewhat suspect. They're like a minefield. And what you do is the way you can eat there is you have appetizers instead of main dishes, and you share a main dish with somebody else, and you take something back in a doggy bag, and you scrape the sauce off. And everything is a strategy of defensive strategy.
Exactly.
And what I want to do is flip that now and say, what are you doing to train the next generation of chefs up so that we can have food on menus for people who want to know how to eat lighter, if you will?
First of all, we teach the basics. That's so very, very important, because without that you cannot advance.
Okay.
Once they have the requisite skills and understand the basic cooking fundamentals really well, then we can move on. And what we do, we essentially have taken the subject of nutrition out of the textbook and we put it on the plate.
Okay.
Because if you teach something only by theory, I think that's great, but it never really shows the results. And the results are demonstrated in a public restaurant.
Okay.
Meaning that whatever is being prepared is being consumed by the paying public. So now you have realistic conditions.
So you're not a little school somewhere without somebody eating it, not just the students eating it.
What's the point? You cook food, you want to eat it. But the real thing is, there is the public coming to this restaurant, they order like in any other restaurant, and they pay for it.
Yeah.
And now you can measure how well you actually are doing.
Okay.
And so taking nutrition out of the textbook, putting it on the plate is so very, very important. The process, however, to get to that point means that we need to be better cooks, because we no longer can depend on butter and cream and all the good things. They're wonderful flavor carriers. We now have to be smart about cooking. And one way to be smart is to examine techniques. You know, I see you use these non-stick skillets. They're wonderful because you use none or maybe just little fat.
Yeah.
We want to get away from relying on fat as the flavor carrier. So we look for reductions, we look for extracts, we look for herbs, and we look for great cooking methods. And I watched you. When you brown food, in this case pears and apples, and you saute them, you caramelize the natural protein, and that creates flavor. And it's a better and more honest flavor than what you get by just adding fat to it. So I think understanding the basic principles, understanding the techniques to generate flavor, and then, like you said before, start out with good ingredients. It's not a big deal to buy good apples as opposed to just being, accepting anything that comes through the back door.
Sure. Now, you've got a restaurant called St. Andrew's Cafe at CIA, but and that's a place where it is your trial restaurant where the chefs come in and they train. And what's the percentage of calories from fat that you look for as a sort of ballpark?
Well, let's first say Burberry. In America, approximately average diet would show that about 50% of calories come from fat, which is huge. We have brought this down to an average of 15 to 20%, which is a huge reduction. And consequently, you cannot just take the fat out and forget about it. And business as usual, you have to find ways and methods to make up for it. And this is exactly what we just talked about.
Okay. Now, they come in, it's called St. Andrew's Cafe, but you've also got a new restaurant that I just heard about.
Yes.
Called the Apple Pie?
The Apple Pie Cafe, bakery cafe.
Is it just going to be bakery?
It's savory items, but mostly wonderful breads, desserts, and wonderful coffees, and things of that nature. And we call it apple pie because everybody knows what an apple pie tastes like. Yeah. So people feel comfortable. And I think this whole notion of comfort food is very, very important.
Yeah, well, talk to me a bit more about comfort food, because you've come from a stage of these marvelous creations and just recently things stacked up and up and up so that you feel a bit intimidated to eat them. But great looking food, but it doesn't necessarily comfort. I mean, are we looking in the future to comfort food as being the style?
I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, intimidation shouldn't be part of the game. what do I gain if I present the customer with this tower on a small plate and then watch them from the back and see if they make fools of themselves by eating it or trying to do so, because things fall all over the place. You want customers to feel comfortable. Now, there's nothing that generates more comfort than being reminded of flavors that were part of the diet that you had at home. Because it was cooked with love, it was cooked with care, and the surroundings were wonderful and comfortable. And this style of comfort food is something which I believe more and more restaurants will realize that this is what they have to do. And it's so simple, but you have to cook well.
Okay. Always notice he says cook well. But here, if so many people are eating out now and not cooking at home, this new breed of people who are arriving, they don't have anything that they remember that comforted them at home. It was something nuked in a microwave, and that doesn't feel so good. So what's your answer to that?
We generate the memories for them. No, really. Of course. People are not, I think they're sometimes smarter than what we give them credit for. If you put food in front of them that's honest and clean and extremely well cooked, has the right flavors, they may not remember that, but they appreciate it. And so they begin their own memories and their own data bank. And I think a restaurateur should be smart enough to go back to where it all came from, to foods that are really basic. And when you do that, you can't hide behind 50 herbs and spices. You cannot say, well, the ingredient from Vietnam didn't mix well with the Mediterranean spice. Forget about all that nonsense. It's what you present in front of the customer and what you like. Chefs also need to eat in their own restaurants. Because if they don't, they never know what the customer would like.
Right.
And
I heard we're about to eat in our own restaurant, so
that's great.
and we're going to get one of you to come and join us. Let me just quickly see what's going on here. Oh, that's good. It didn't totally burn. Now, let's get ready for this one, because need to get one of you out. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I don't have hot dishes. I have cold. We thought we'd put them in some... Thought we'd show off since you're here. Okay, we'll just get here. This is what they call 9 out. So we'll simply take that up. It's crispy. It has that marvelous succulence underneath it. That is going to be the portion size. And every time we do this, we want to be able to show you classically what we are producing by way of portion, and then you're going to have to make up your mind about whether you think for your family that's going to be enough. Because so often, one restaurant is competing with another one down the road, as you know, and they're competing on the basis of portion size. And we, the consumers, I don't know what we are, Strasbourg geese or something, trying to keep up with it. Here's a little vanilla yogurt, 1.5% vanilla yogurt. And just simply stir that up just a little bit. Take the reduction from this pan. Remember what that reduction was? We had strained it from that. And that is just simply transferring the juices from the fruit and the wine to the yogurt there, and just blending that together, just with a spoon will do. And that then can become what has all the appearance of a kind of custard over the top. It's going to have the flavor of vanilla in it as well. It's extremely simple to do. And it's that sort of thing which can be really helpful in being able to present this. Now, right here in this dish, and once again taking that, that yogurt, and if the yogurt moves, if you take it straight from the carton, really quite well. If you just put a couple of dollops of that on the plate. There, this is the first time I've ever done this for anybody. So this is going to be kind of exciting. I actually did this, it's not the first time I've done it for everyone. I did do it the other day, it's a ridiculous thing to say. So, might not even do it this time. You've got one of these, I know. All right. Then here is what I have done. It's rather like a tarte tatin. You slit that on the top. Here I've got some caramelized pears, which have only been caramelized for one reason, is that they were just sitting there in that dish and just cooking over a low heat. So that's just the pears, the ginger, and the walnuts there. In a sense, it looks like eggs sunny side up, you know, if they weren't quite so dark. So I want you to taste that one, and ladies and gentlemen, what I want to do with this one, here, I'll pop it over there now. We'll give you a spoon in a second. I promise, but we'll give you a spoon now. Has a nice smell, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We'll talk about presentation in a moment, but that is Pears Alexandra. That's after your daughter. I just wanted to name something after your daughter. She's a sweet kid, and really sweet kid, and wanted to say that for her. Alexandra, just for you. Okay, here we go. Let's find somebody to come and eat with us who looks as if they would thoroughly enjoy this. Who is it going to be? How about you?
Oh, thanks.
All right? Okay. Good.
Cook today's recipe with your friends. It's right here in the gathering place. Graham is now cooking every single recipe in the book so that you can join him and Trina as they search the world for recipes just for you. Call toll-free 1-877-287-5253 or send $29.95 plus GST along with $5 for shipping and handling to Graham Kerr's Gathering Place, P.O. Box 535, 31 Adelaide Street East, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, M5C 2J6.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have been joined by Eileen. Say hello, Eileen. Hello, Eileen. I love the half moon ceramic. You're just dressed for the whole thing. You match the plate and everything else. Dive into that. See what you think about that. Take just a little of the mix and try and get some of the fruit underneath. No.
Great.
Very nice.
Does it taste like home, like you remember the comfort food of home and things like that?
Definitely comfort.
Yes.
It is, isn't it?
Does it?
What does it remind you of?
Well, I'm from the West Coast originally. Yeah.
Were there good times around the table? You had good times with family?
And
Good.
apple pie.
Good. Okay, try this. Just a little piece of that, and we'll come back to you in a second. We'll have this question
Oh,
first of
it
all,
is
Janine.
really hard being out here watching you eat that. I want to introduce you to Sandra. Now, Sandra is part of a women's group that's here called Jewish Women International. So we have quite a few women in the audience today from there. So Sandra has a question for our guest.
It seems to me that it's becoming a scientific process to eat healthy these days. Is this true?
No, I'm enjoying the food way too much, but if it is science, it's not fun. And if it's science, it probably doesn't taste good. And so our attitude is that it should come from the heart. It has to come from how you feel about food. And if you add to that a little bit of passion, I guarantee you it will taste good. And more often than not, if food tastes good, chances are it's well prepared and it's good for you. That combination.
Yeah. What happens when it's over the top, though? You know, I mean, there are dishes. Forgive me, but Eggs Benedict, you know, is sort of almost gastronomic pornography. It's just fat on fat on fat.
Exactly.
And there are times when it can be overdone. Yeah.
Because people don't know when to stop. They think more of one thing like fat is better.
Yeah.
They don't realize that less is more. And that the truth of flavors is found in food that are based on the very basic principle. Can I talk about this
Yes,
for?
yes.
Or
Oh, yeah, very quickly, yes. I mean, what, quicker?
what?
Whatever speed you like.
No. If you look at it, what you've done here, and probably very intentionally, you've not only created comfort food and basic flavors, you also created different textures. There are 3-4 different textures in this one cup. There's the softness of the apple, something even softer of the pear, something softer in the sauce, and then you topped it with something very crisp. And people want to see in their food variation, but not variation that's contradicting, but variation that's complementary.
Good. We must be complimentary because you look so gorgeous. Let's have
Yes, I
find
have
out.
Jerry, who's pretty in pink, for sure. Go ahead, Jerry.
Hi, I just wanted to know if I cook more nutritional, more healthy food, am I losing the flavor?
Only if you think that nutrition is what you really put number one. Then you probably lose flavor. If you say I want flavor number one, then you find ways, like we've seen here today, how to generate flavors. So I'd say absolutely not. In fact, our motto back in Hyde Park is in the nutrition restaurant, if it doesn't taste good, we don't want to serve it. So its flavor is still the number one issue that we are talking about.
Good.
Thank you.
Great advice, by the way. I'll come to you in a moment and tell you what the numbers are in this dish, and how's that for your daughter?
Wonderful. I will take that back and make it for her.
Good.
But what I like here again is that the ginger adds a little spice to it. Wonderful nuance.
It's
wonderful,
and it's different.
And
isn't it?
you took an old classic and updated it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. What else is there?
Yep.
Okay, we'll be back in just a second, give you the numbers and see what we're going to do today. Thank you. Thank you. Here we go. Here is the classic that would be made, as in the CIA, would be the 386, the one that Dan made so beautifully for me. This one takes it in at 216. The total fat in that first one was 15. Remember, he came from a farm initially, and he was going back to his roots and everything that he knew so well. This is 6 now. Saturated fat was 9 because of the butter content. We've still got butter in, so we come in with a 1 gram per person. Carbohydrates are 63, that's 41 now, and fiber is a 4. That's because of the pears and the extra apples that we placed in it. So actually, as a dessert, you would be able to eat out, I think, quite comfortably in a restaurant and be able to have that one. As you would, in fact, that one. It's not a difficult dessert, that one, but this one is just getting there a little bit. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Eileen. Okay, so every guest who comes brings a great deal to me, not only because they value us with their company, but also they always teach me. And I'm taught once again something which I've heard all my life. I entered the kitchen when I was 10. My father had a hotel, and I entered in at 10 years of age. And it's always been flavor, flavor. And it always is judged upon the plate. And so this, for you at home, where does that fit? And where does it fit for me? I cook for Trina, and Trina, as you know, my wife, is a high-risk individual with lots of things, you know, that are difficult for her to face nutritionally. But always I have found with her that flavor is it. And if it looks wonderful, if it's got aromas and colors and textures, it's all there on the plate and it just sings. Trina says I prefer to eat at home, you know. Doesn't have such a good view as some restaurants have, but it's just a lovely place to eat. And I think it's because of this issue, and it's driven it back to me again. Please put flavor first, no matter what your nutritional needs are. Lead with flavor. Okay, I'll be back in just a moment. On the next episode of The Gathering Place, we are going to Portland, Maine, and we're going to look at a New England boiled dinner. And we're going to have a guest, Barry Efron, who's going to talk to us about very new things that are happening today as far as heart disease is concerned. So we're going to eat marvelous flavor and talk about good health all at the same time on the next episode. See you then. God bless you.